The massive crystal ship appeared without warning above Earth's orbital defense station. Commander Lee Tae-ho stood on the command deck watching the alien vessel through reinforced windows that stretched across the entire wall. The ship was beautiful, in a way that made his stomach turn. It looked like a giant jewel floating in space, all sharp edges and glowing surfaces that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, they're requesting permission to dock," said Lieutenant Park Min-ho from his station. His voice was steady, but Lee could hear the fear underneath. Nobody had expected this. The aliens had never come to Earth before. They usually sent messages from far away, cold words that told humans to stay in their small corner of space. "Grant permission," Lee said. His voice stayed calm even though his mind was racing. He had been preparing for this day for 15 years. Every morning he woke up knowing that eventually the Galactic Council would come. They would not come with gifts or friendship. They would come with demands. The docking process took 2 hours. The alien ship was so large that their orbital station looked like a toy next to it. Lee used the time to send coded messages to bases across human space. Short messages that looked like routine maintenance reports. Messages that would activate sleeping protocols and wake-up systems that had been hidden for decades. Dr. Park So-young arrived just as the alien delegation was preparing to board the station. She was the best xenobiologist on Earth and had spent her entire career studying alien races from intercepted communications and stolen data. She was also the only human who had ever successfully communicated with Council species without causing an immediate diplomatic incident. "What do we know about them?" Lee asked her as they walked toward the docking bay. "They're called the Veltar," So-young replied, checking her tablet. "Silicon-based life forms from the Kepler system. They've been with the Council for over 800 years. They're usually the ones sent to deliver ultimatums to species that refuse to follow Council regulations." Lee nodded. He already knew this information, but he wanted to hear it again. He wanted to be absolutely sure about what they were facing. The Veltar were not diplomats. They were the Council's enforcers. The species that showed up when talking was over and action was required. The docking bay doors opened with a soft hiss. 3 figures walked through, their crystalline bodies reflecting the harsh lighting of the station. They were tall, much taller than humans, and they moved with a strange flowing motion that made Lee think of water running downhill. The lead figure wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor made of the same crystal material as their ship. "I am High Enforcer Keshatal of the Veltar," the lead alien said. Its voice came from a translation device attached to its chest, producing words in perfect English with no emotion whatsoever. "I speak for the Galactic Council in matters of species regulation and compliance." "Welcome to Earth Station 1, Lee replied. "I am Commander Lee Tae-ho of the Earth Defense Force. Your species has violated 17 separate Council regulations regarding expansion beyond authorized territory," Keshtal continued without acknowledging Lee's greeting. "You have established unauthorized colonies in 4 star systems. You have developed military technology without Council approval. You have refused to register your population for proper monitoring and control." So, Young stepped forward slightly. "High Enforcer, Earth has always sought peaceful coexistence with Council species. Our expansion has been purely for resources and living space. We pose no threat to any established Council territory." Keshtal's head turned toward her with mechanical precision. "Dr. Park So-young, your file indicates expertise in xenobiology and linguistics. You should understand that intent is irrelevant. Your species has exceeded the boundaries established for primitive civilizations." The word primitive hung in the air like a challenge. Lee felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. This was exactly what he had expected. The Council saw humans as children playing with dangerous toys. They had no idea what humans were really capable of. "What does the Council require?" Lee asked. Keshatal activated a holographic projector built into its armor. A 3-dimensional map of human space appeared between them, showing all known human colonies and installations. Red zones appeared around most of them, indicating areas that would be off-limits under Council authority. "All human populations will be relocated to designated primitive zones within the Sol system," Keshatal announced. "All unauthorized colonies will be dismantled. All military vessels will be surrendered to Council forces for inspection and disposal. All research into advanced technologies will cease immediately. Lee studied the hologram carefully. The red zones covered 90% of human territory. The designated primitive zones were basically a prison that would keep humanity trapped in their home system forever. Millions of humans living on distant colonies would be forced to abandon their homes and return to an already overcrowded Earth. And if we refuse? So Young asked. Refusal is not an option, Keshetal replied. Species that refuse to comply with Council regulations are classified as hostile. Hostile species are dealt with through military intervention. Military intervention, Lee repeated slowly. You mean war. The Council does not engage in war with primitive species, Keshetal said. The Council conducts enforcement actions. Your species would be pacified and relocated. Those who resist pacification would be eliminated. The casual way the alien spoke about eliminating humans made Lee's blood run cold. But he had expected this too. He had read the reports from other species that had faced Council enforcement actions. The lucky ones were relocated to prison worlds. The unlucky ones simply disappeared. How long do we have to consider your offer? Lee asked. 72 standard hours, Keshetal replied. Council enforcement fleet will arrive at the edge of your system in exactly 72 hours. If compliance has not begun by that time, pacification will commence immediately. The hologram disappeared and Keshetal turned to leave. Its two companions had not spoken a single word during the entire meeting. They followed their leader back toward the docking bay without looking back. High Enforcer, So Young called after them. Is there any room for negotiation? Any possibility of finding a compromise that allows humanity to maintain some of our colonies? Keshetal paused at the doorway. Dr. Park, your species achieved faster than light travel only 53 years ago. You have no technology, no resources, and no military capability that the Council requires. You exist at Council discretion. The terms offered are more generous than your species deserves. With that, the three aliens left. Lee watched their ship undock and disappear into the darkness between stars. So Young stood beside him, staring out at the empty space where the crystal vessel had been. They really think we're helpless, she said quietly. Good, Lee replied. That's exactly what we want them to think. He activated his personal communicator and spoke a single word. Omega. Across human space, hidden receivers picked up the coded transmission. On distant mining stations, workers stopped their digging and began uncovering weapons that had been buried beneath tons of ore. On colony worlds, farmers abandoned their fields and reported to concealed military facilities. On research stations, scientists activated computers that had been disguised as atmospheric processors for decades. Captain Kim Do-hyun received the signal aboard his ship, the Silent Thunder, currently hiding in the asteroid belt around Proxima Centauri. He had been waiting for this moment for 8 years. His crew of 200 elite soldiers immediately began final preparations for an operation they had rehearsed countless times, but never expected to actually perform. Lee returned to his office and sealed the door. From a hidden safe, he retrieved a datapad that contained the real truth about human expansion into space. The Council thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had stumbled into faster-than-light travel through luck and accident. They believed human colonies were desperate attempts to find living space for an overcrowded planet. They were wrong about everything. Lee activated the datapad and began reviewing deployment schedules for assets the Council had no idea existed. Hidden shipyards that had been building warships disguised as cargo vessels. Research facilities that had been reverse engineering captured alien technology for 20 years. Training centers where human soldiers learned to fight in zero gravity, using weapons that could cut through Council armor. The 72-hour countdown had begun. But Lee was not planning humanity's surrender. He was planning the Council's first real defeat in over 500 years. Captain Kim Do-hyun floated in the zero-gravity command center of the Silent Thunder, watching his crew prepare for the most important mission in human history. The ship was completely invisible to Council sensors, hidden not just by advanced stealth technology, but by its location deep inside an asteroid field that Council ships avoided. For 8 years, Do-hyun had used this hiding spot to observe Council patrol routes and study their military tactics. "Status report," he said to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Yun Mi-rae. "All systems operational," Mi-rae replied, checking her display screens. "Stealth field at maximum efficiency. The quantum drive is ready for immediate departure. All strike teams are armed and prepared." Do-hyun nodded and activated his personal communicator. The message he sent was simple, but carried enormous weight. "Package secured, returning to base." It was code that told Commander Lee Tae-ho that the most sensitive part of Operation Omega was about to begin. The Silent Thunder moved through space like a ghost, its advanced engines producing no heat signature that Council sensors could detect. Do-hyun had spent years perfecting these stealth systems, using technology that officially did not exist. The Council believed humans were barely capable of building simple spacecraft. They had no idea that human engineers had been studying captured Council technology for decades, improving it and adapting it for human use. The ship's destination was a research facility hidden inside what appeared to be a dead moon, orbiting a gas giant in the Tau Ceti system. To any Council patrol that might scan the area, it looked like a standard mining operation run by humans who were too primitive to extract resources efficiently. The reality was very different. Dr. Han Soo-jin met Do-hyun at the facility's hidden docking bay. She was the head of Project Looking Glass, the most classified research program in human space. For 15 years, she had been working with a team of the best scientists Earth could produce, reverse engineering every piece of alien technology they could acquire. "The data cores are ready for transport," she told Do-hyun as they walked through corridors carved from solid rock. "Everything we've learned about Council military systems, their communication protocols, their ship designs, their weapons technology." "How much of it can we actually use?" Do-hyun asked. "More than they think we can," Soo-jin replied with a thin smile. "The Council makes the same mistake that Earth's old empires used to make. They assume that primitive people are also stupid people. They entered a massive cavern that had been converted into a research laboratory. Hundreds of scientists worked at stations filled with alien technology in various states of disassembly. Holographic displays showed Council ship schematics with detailed analysis of their weaknesses. Computer screens displayed tactical simulations of space battles that had never been fought but were planned down to the smallest detail. "Show me what we have," Do-hyun said. Soo-jin led him to a central display that showed a complete tactical analysis of Council military forces. "The enforcement fleet heading toward Earth consists of 200 ships," she began. "Standard Council, peacekeeping formation designed to intimidate primitive species into surrender without actually fighting." "What kind of ships?" Do-hyun asked. "Mostly older vessels," Soo-jin replied. "The Council hasn't fought a real war in over 300 years. Their military exists primarily for show. These ships are designed to look impressive and overwhelm primitive species with superior technology, but they're not built for actual combat against an opponent that can fight back." Do-hyun studied the ship specifications that appeared on the screen. Council vessels were indeed impressive to look at, with advanced energy shields and powerful weapons. But Soo-jin's analysis revealed critical weaknesses that human forces could exploit. "Their shield generators are centralized," she continued. "Take out the main power core and the entire defensive system fails. Their weapon systems are automated, which means they're vulnerable to electronic warfare. Most importantly, their tactics haven't changed in centuries because they've never faced serious resistance." "And our capabilities?" Do-hyun asked. Soo-jin's smile widened. "That's where things get interesting." She activated another display that showed human military assets scattered across multiple star systems. To Council observers, these looked like mining stations, research outposts, and cargo vessels. The truth was very different. "Mining Station 7 in the Kepler system," Soo-jin said, highlighting one location. "The Council thinks it's a primitive operation run by humans who can barely extract basic minerals. In reality, it's a fortress, equipped with weapons that can destroy Council battleships at range." More locations appeared on the display, each one revealing hidden military capabilities that the Council had never suspected. Colony ships that were actually mobile weapon platforms, research stations that were really military command centers, cargo vessels that carried enough firepower to level cities. "How long have we been preparing for this?" Do-hyun asked, though he already knew the answer. "Since first contact," Soo-jin replied. "Commander Lee Tae-ho began planning for this scenario the day we received our first message from the Council. He knew they would eventually come with demands we couldn't accept." Do-hyun loaded the data cores into a secure container and prepared to return to his ship. But before leaving, he had one more question. "Dr. Han, do we actually have enough firepower to defeat a Council enforcement fleet?" Soo-jin considered her answer carefully. "Captain, the Council enforcement fleet is designed to pacify primitive species that fight with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They're not designed to fight opponents who have been studying their technology and tactics for decades." "That's not what I asked." "Yes," she said simply. "We have enough firepower. The question isn't whether we can win. The question is whether we can win in a way that sends the right message to the rest of the galaxy." Do-hyun understood. This wasn't just about defeating one enforcement fleet. This was about proving to every species in the galaxy that the Council could be challenged and beaten. It was about changing the balance of power that had existed for centuries. The journey back to Earth took 18 hours. During the trip, Do-hyun reviewed the tactical data and began finalizing battle plans that had been developed over years of careful preparation. The Silent Thunder remained undetected as it passed through several star systems where Council patrols operated, demonstrating once again that human stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone realized. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Park So-young was preparing for her own crucial role in Operation Omega. She stood in a recording studio deep beneath Earth's surface, reviewing a speech that would be broadcast across the galaxy in less than 48 hours. The speech had been written and rewritten dozens of times, every word chosen carefully to achieve maximum psychological impact. "The key is to make them underestimate us right up until the moment we strike," she told her assistant, Dr. Kim Jin-woo. "They need to believe we're desperate and afraid. They need to think we're going to surrender without a fight." Jin-woo nodded. He had worked with So-young for years and understood the delicate psychological warfare they were conducting. "The preliminary broadcasts are already being sent," he reported. "Standard diplomatic channels requesting negotiation and mercy. Everything the Council expects to hear from a primitive species facing extinction." Back on Earth Station 1, Commander Lee Tae-ho received confirmation that Captain Do-hyun's mission had been successful. All the data they needed was now in human hands, and final preparations for Operation Omega could begin. Lee activated his command console and began sending orders to human forces across known space. The orders were simple but carried enormous implications. Every hidden military facility was to achieve full operational status within 36 hours. All disguised warships were to move to predetermined positions. All personnel were to prepare for immediate combat operations. Most importantly, every human civilian in Council-monitored areas was to behave exactly as they always had. They were to continue their daily routines, maintain their communications, and give absolutely no indication that anything unusual was happening. The Council's surveillance systems had to continue believing that humans were primitive and helpless, right up until the moment the trap was sprung. Lee looked out at the stars and thought about the alien ultimatum: 72 hours to surrender or face destruction. The Council enforcement fleet would arrive expecting to find a terrified species ready to abandon their colonies and accept relocation to primitive zones. Instead, they would find something no Council force had faced in over 500 years. An opponent that was ready, willing, and able to fight back with weapons and tactics the Council couldn't even imagine. The countdown continued. In 36 hours, the most powerful military force in known space would learn that humans were not the primitive species they appeared to be. Lee smiled grimly and continued reviewing battle plans that would change the course of galactic history. The Council enforcement fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, exactly 72 hours after High Enforcer Keshtal had delivered the ultimatum. Fleet Commander Zothkar of the Hegemony species stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Justice, and surveyed the human system through advanced sensors that could detect energy signatures from millions of kilometers away. "Initial scan complete," reported his tactical officer. "No significant military presence detected. The primitives appear to have a few patrol vessels near their home planet, but nothing that poses any threat to our operations." Zothkar nodded with satisfaction. This would be another routine pacification operation, just like the dozens he had overseen during his long career. The humans would either surrender immediately or put up token resistance that would be crushed within hours. Either way, the operation would be completed quickly and efficiently. "Deploy the fleet in standard pacification formation," he ordered. "Begin broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies." 200 council ships spread out across the outer edge of the Sol system in a formation that had been used successfully for centuries. Large battleships formed the core of the formation, surrounded by smaller cruisers and destroyers. The formation was designed to demonstrate overwhelming force while allowing rapid response to any resistance. On Earth Station 1, Commander Lee Tae-ho watched the Council fleet deployment through long-range sensors. Everything was proceeding exactly as human strategists had predicted. The Council was using the same tactics they had used against every primitive species they had ever encountered. "They're taking the bait," he told Dr. Park So-young, who stood beside him on the command deck. "Standard formation, standard tactics, standard arrogance." "Signal from Captain Do-hyun," reported Lieutenant Park Min-ho from his communications station. "All hidden assets are in position and ready for activation." Lee nodded and activated the station's internal communications system. "All personnel prepare for Operation Omega initiation. This is not a drill." Across human space, hidden facilities that had appeared to be simple mining operations or research stations began their transformation. Massive camouflaged panels slid, a way to reveal weapon systems that had been concealed for years. Ships that looked like cargo haulers shed their disguises and activated military-grade sensors and weapons. Personnel who appeared to be civilian miners and researchers revealed their true identities as highly trained military specialists. Captain Kim Do-hyun watched the transformation from the bridge of the Silent Thunder, which remained hidden in an asteroid field near Mars. His ship was completely invisible to Council sensors, but his own sensors gave him a perfect view of the enemy fleet. 200 Council ships arranged in a formation that made them easy targets for the weapon systems that were about to be revealed. "All strike teams report ready," his second-in-command Mireille announced. "Hidden fortresses are powered up and weapons are locked onto targets." "Wait for the commander's signal," Do-hyun replied. "We only get one chance at surprise." The Council fleet continued its advance toward Earth, broadcasting surrender demands that no one was answering. Fleet Commander Zothkar grew slightly impatient as his communications officer reported no response from the human government. "Perhaps they require additional motivation," Zothkar mused. "Target their orbital installations. Prepare to demonstrate our capabilities." This was exactly what Lee Tae-ho had been waiting for. The Council was about to commit an act of aggression that would justify everything that followed. He activated his command console and spoke the words that would begin humanity's first major space battle. "Operation Omega is now active. All units, execute immediately." The transformation of human space began instantly. What had appeared to be a primitive mining station orbiting Jupiter suddenly revealed itself as a massive fortress bristling with weapons that could destroy battleships. The energy signature it produced was so powerful that Council sensors immediately registered it as a major threat. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy spikes throughout the system," the tactical officer on the Inevitable Justice reported, with growing alarm. "Multiple installations are powering up weapon systems of unknown configuration." Before Zothkar could respond, similar reports came from across his fleet. Council sensors were detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist in a primitive system. Installations that had appeared harmless were suddenly revealing military capabilities that rivaled Council technology. "Impossible," Zothkar muttered. "Our intelligence reports indicated this species barely possessed basic spaceflight capability." The answer to his confusion came in the form of weapons fire that erupted from dozens of hidden human positions simultaneously. Energy beams that could punch through Council armor struck his fleet from multiple directions. The weapons were clearly based on Council technology, but they had been modified and improved in ways that made them even more effective than the originals. "Shields up! Return fire!" Zothkar ordered, but his fleet was already in chaos. Captain Do-hyun chose this moment to reveal the Silent Thunder and its escort of 12 other stealth ships that had been hiding throughout the system. The small human fleet appeared suddenly on Council sensors, moving at attack speed toward the rear of the enemy formation. "All ships attack pattern Delta," Do-hyun commanded. "Target their command vessels first." The stealth ships struck like ghosts, appearing from nowhere to attack Council ships that were already under fire from the hidden fortresses. Human weapons were precise and devastating, targeting the exact weak points that Dr. Han Soo-jin's research had identified years earlier. Fleet Commander Zothkar watched in horror as his carefully organized formation began to collapse. Ships that had never faced serious opposition were being destroyed by an enemy they had completely underestimated. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "These are supposed to be primitives." His tactical officer was struggling to make sense of the sensor readings. "Sir, the human weapons appear to be based on our own technology, but they've been modified. Their energy output exceeds our specifications. Their targeting systems are more accurate than ours. Worse still, the human tactics were unlike anything the Council had encountered. Instead of meeting the enforcement fleet in direct battle, the humans had laid a trap that turned the Council's own formation against them. Hidden weapons platforms created crossfire patterns that made it impossible for Council ships to maneuver effectively. Stealth ships appeared and disappeared at will, striking targets and vanishing before return fire could be directed at them. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. As the battle continued, more and more human ships appeared from hiding places throughout the system. These weren't the simple cargo vessels and colony ships that Council intelligence had reported. These were warships that had been disguised as civilian craft, carrying weapons and armor that were clearly designed for serious military operations. Do-hyun's voice cut through the chaos on Council communication channels as he broadcast on all frequencies. "Council Fleet, this is Captain Kim Do-hyun of the Earth Defense Force. You are outgunned and surrounded. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions for prisoners of war." The offer of surrender stunned the Council forces even more than the military defeat they were experiencing. No primitive species had ever been in a position to offer terms to a Council enforcement fleet. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction of their ships. Fleet Commander Zothkar found himself facing a choice he had never imagined having to make. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had thought was helpless. Nearly 30 Council ships had already been destroyed or disabled, and the human attacks showed no signs of slowing down. "Sir, we're receiving damage reports from across the fleet," his communications officer reported. "Multiple ships are requesting permission to withdraw." Zothkar looked at the tactical display that showed his once mighty fleet in complete disarray. Human forces had appeared from everywhere, using weapons and tactics that demonstrated careful planning and preparation. This wasn't a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This was a carefully executed military operation by opponents who had been preparing for this battle for years. The most humiliating part was that the humans weren't even trying to destroy his entire fleet. They were systematically disabling Council ships and taking prisoners, demonstrating both their military superiority and their adherence to civilized rules of warfare. They were proving that they were not the savage primitives the Council had believed them to be. "Sir, the humans are boarding disabled vessels and taking our crews prisoner," the tactical officer reported. "They appear to be treating prisoners according to standard galactic conventions." Zothkar realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in Council history. A primitive species had not only successfully resisted a Council enforcement action, they had turned it into a complete disaster. More than that, they were demonstrating military capabilities that suggested they were far more advanced than anyone had realized. The battle that was supposed to demonstrate Council superiority was instead proving that the Council's assumptions about Prim Dr. Park So-young stood in the communication center deep beneath Earth's surface, preparing to deliver the message that would change galactic politics forever. Around her, technicians worked at control panels connected to the most powerful transmitter ever built by human hands. The transmitter would use captured Council communication arrays to broadcast her message to every civilized world in known space. "All systems ready, Dr. Park," announced Chief Technician Lee Jung-ho. "We have access to Council communication networks through the captured vessels. Signal strength is sufficient to reach every major population center in the galaxy." So Young nodded and reviewed her notes one final time. The message she was about to deliver had been carefully crafted over months of planning. Every word had been chosen to achieve maximum psychological impact on species that had never imagined humans could challenge Council authority. "Begin transmission," she said. The recording began with images from the recent battle, showing Council ships being systematically disabled by human forces. The footage was clear and undeniable proof that the supposedly primitive humans had defeated a full Council enforcement fleet without suffering significant losses. "People of the galaxy," So Young began, her voice calm and professional. "I am Dr. Park So Young, speaking on behalf of the human species and the sovereign worlds of human space." She paused, allowing the significance of her words to register. No species had ever claimed sovereignty in defiance of Council authority. For decades, the Galactic Council has classified humanity as a primitive species, subject to Council authority and restricted to designated zones of space. Today, we reject this classification and declare our independence from Council control. The broadcast continued with technical data from the battle, showing detailed analysis of Council ship weaknesses and human weapon capabilities. The data proved that humans had been studying Council technology for years and had developed superior alternatives. "The Council enforcement fleet sent to pacify our species has been defeated," So Young continued. "Their ships are disabled or destroyed. Their crews are prisoners of war, being treated according to galactic conventions. This victory was achieved through careful preparation, superior strategy, and technologies that the Council believed impossible for a primitive species to develop." In the command center of the disabled Council flagship, Fleet Commander Zothkar watched the human broadcast with growing amazement. The woman speaking was clearly educated and intelligent, delivering a message that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of galactic politics and military strategy. Nothing about her suggested primitive thinking or savage behavior. "How long have they been planning this?" he asked Captain Do-hyun, who had come aboard to oversee prisoner processing. "Since first contact," Do-hyun replied honestly. "Commander Lee Tae-ho began preparing for this scenario the day we received our first message from the Council." "Impossible. Your species achieved faster than light travel only 50 years ago." "Your intelligence was incomplete," Do-hyun said. "We achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. We've been preparing for war with the Council for 30 years. The broadcast continued as Dr. So Young revealed more shocking information about human capabilities. She showed images of hidden military installations throughout human space, each one capable of defending against Council attacks. She displayed technical specifications for human weapons that were clearly superior to Council equivalents. Most importantly, she presented evidence that humans had been intercepting Council communications and studying their military tactics for decades. "The Council has operated under the assumption that primitive species are also ignorant species," So Young said. "This assumption has proven to be fatally flawed. Humanity has used the time granted by our supposed primitive status to study, learn, and prepare." On Council worlds throughout the galaxy, government officials watched the broadcast with growing alarm. Species that had been members of the Council for centuries were seeing their military forces humiliated by opponents they had never considered a threat. More disturbing was the implication of So Young's message. If humans could successfully challenge Council authority, what did that mean for other species that had been classified as primitive? How many other civilizations were secretly preparing for their own independence? The broadcast reached its climax as So Young presented humanity's demands to the galaxy. Humanity demands full recognition as a sovereign species with all rights and privileges accorded to advanced civilizations, she announced. "We demand representation in galactic government. We demand the right to expand and develop without council interference." She paused, allowing the revolutionary nature of these demands to register. Furthermore, humanity extends protection to any species that chooses to reject council authority and claim independence. We will not stand by while the council continues to suppress the development of younger civilizations. This final statement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not just claiming independence for themselves, they were positioning themselves as protectors of other species that wanted freedom from council control. Captain Do-hyun received urgent communications from human forces throughout known space as the broadcast continued. The message was having exactly the effect that planners had hoped for. On dozens of worlds, species that had been classified as primitive were beginning to question their status. Some were even beginning to demand their own independence. Phase 2 is beginning, Do-hyun told his communications officer. Initiate demonstration strikes. The second phase of Operation Omega was designed to prove that humanity's victory over the enforcement fleet was not a lucky accident. Human strike teams that had been positioned throughout council space began surgical attacks on military installations that were supposedly impossible for primitive species to reach. The strikes were not invasions or attempts at conquest. They were demonstrations of capability, designed to prove that human forces could appear anywhere in council space at will. Strike teams would appear at a council military base, disable its defenses, plant monitoring equipment, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. On the council world of Vega Prime, Colonel Yoon Seok-jin led a team of 20 human soldiers in an assault on a military research facility that was supposed to be impregnable. The facility was protected by energy shields and automated defense systems that could destroy any approaching vessel. The human team bypassed these defenses using stealth technology and detailed intelligence about council security systems. They disabled the facility's main computer, downloaded terabytes of classified research data, and left behind a simple message: humanity was here. Similar operations were conducted simultaneously on 12 other council worlds. In each case, human forces demonstrated the ability to strike targets that should have been completely safe from primitive species. The psychological impact was devastating. Council military commanders who had never worried about security suddenly found themselves vulnerable to attack by opponents they had dismissed as harmless. The invincibility that had protected Council authority for centuries was revealed to be an illusion. Dr. So-young concluded her galactic broadcast with a message that would be quoted by historians for generations. "The age of Council dominance is ending," she declared. "The galaxy is entering a new era where all species, regardless of their age or origin, have the right to determine their own destiny. Humanity stands ready to defend this principle against any who would oppose it." The transmission ended, leaving billions of beings throughout the galaxy to contemplate a future that no one had imagined possible just days earlier. On Earth, Commander Lee Tae-ho reviewed reports from human forces throughout known space. The operation was proceeding better than even the most optimistic projections had predicted. Council military forces were in chaos, their command structure disrupted by attacks they couldn't prevent or predict. More importantly, the psychological warfare was working. Species throughout the galaxy were beginning to question Council authority. Several primitive civilizations had already sent secret messages to human representatives, asking for support in their own independence movements. Lee activated his communication system and sent a message to Captain Do-hyun. Phase 3 approved. Begin prisoner negotiations. The third phase of Operation Omega would determine whether humanity's military victory could be transformed into lasting political change. Do-hyun would negotiate with the captured council officers, not for humanity's surrender, but for the terms of a new galactic order where the council's authority was no longer absolute. The revolution that had begun with a single battle was spreading throughout the galaxy, and humanity had positioned itself as the leader of forces that would reshape civilization itself. Itiv Species W. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 weeks after the destruction of their enforcement fleet, in a chamber that had not seen such chaos in over 400 years. Representatives from 200 species filled the vast amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of anger, fear, and confusion that echoed off the crystal walls. High Chancellor Velmoth of the Ethereal Collective called for order, but the traditional authority of the office seemed diminished in the wake of humanity's shocking victory. Species that had never questioned council decisions were now demanding explanations for how a primitive civilization had defeated their most powerful military force. The human situation requires immediate response, declared Ambassador Crixtal of the Hegemony. Their rebellion cannot be allowed to spread to other primitive species. What rebellion? Countered Representative Zephyra of the Tau Coalition. The humans requested recognition as a sovereign species. When we refused and sent military forces to relocate them by force, they defended themselves. That is not rebellion, that is survival. The argument that followed revealed deep fractures within the council that had been hidden for centuries. Species that had been classified as advanced were split between those who wanted to crush human independence and those who believed the council's classification system needed fundamental reform. Dr. Park So-young entered the chamber as the official representative of humanity, the first member of a supposedly primitive species ever invited to address the full council. She walked calmly to the speaking platform, surrounded by security guards who seemed uncertain whether she was a diplomatic guest or a dangerous prisoner. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I stand before you not as a supplicant seeking mercy, but as the voice of a species that has proven its right to independence through strength of arms and clarity of purpose." The bold opening statement caused another uproar among council members. High Chancellor Velmoth struggled to maintain order as species representatives shouted demands and accusations. "The human species rejects the classification that has been imposed upon us," So-young continued when the noise subsided. "We reject the assumption that age determines wisdom, that technology determines worth, or that might gives right to rule over others." She activated a holographic projector that displayed tactical analyses of the recent battle, showing how human forces had systematically defeated council ships using superior strategy and modified technology. "Your enforcement fleet was defeated not through luck or desperation, but through careful preparation and superior understanding of military science," she explained. "Humanity has been studying council tactics and technology for decades, improving upon your designs and developing countermeasures to your weapons." Ambassador Crixtal stood to interrupt. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago. How could you possibly have developed superior military technology?" So-young smiled. "Because we learned from your mistakes, Ambassador. Council military doctrine has remained unchanged for centuries, because you have never faced opponents capable of meaningful resistance. Humanity has had the advantage of studying your methods while developing our own in secret." She activated another display that showed the current political situation throughout the galaxy. 17 species formerly classified as primitive had declared independence from council authority in the weeks following humanity's victory. More were preparing to follow. "The galaxy is changing," So-young declared. "The age of unquestioned council authority is ending. Species throughout known space are demanding the right to determine their own futures." High Chancellor Velmoth finally managed to restore some semblance of order to the chamber. "Dr. Park, what does humanity want from this council?" "Full recognition as a sovereign species with voting rights in galactic government," So-young replied, immediately. "Formal acknowledgement that the classification system used to justify council control over younger species is fundamentally flawed. Most importantly, we want the establishment of new protocols that respect the rights of all sapient species, regardless of their age or origin." The demand sent another wave of shouting through the chamber. Some species supported humanity's position, while others demanded immediate military action to crush the rebellion before it spread further. Captain Kim Do-hyun, who had been monitoring the council session from Earth, received an urgent communication from Commander Lee Tae-ho. The message was brief but carried enormous implications. "Council hardliners are preparing military response. Activate contingency protocols immediately." Do-hyun had been expecting this development. Human intelligence networks throughout Council space had reported military preparations on several worlds, indicating that some species were preparing to respond to humanity's challenge with overwhelming force. All units, implement Protocol 7. Do-Hyun commanded through encrypted channels that reached human forces throughout the galaxy. Show them what we're really capable of. Protocol 7 was the final demonstration of human military capability, designed to convince even the most aggressive Council species that war with humanity would be catastrophic for everyone involved. Across the galaxy, human stealth ships that had been hiding near major Council worlds suddenly revealed themselves. These were not the small strike vessels that had been used in previous operations. These were massive dreadnoughts that had been disguised as cargo haulers for years, carrying enough firepower to level continents. The ships did not attack. They simply appeared on Council sensors, broadcasting their weapon specifications and defensive capabilities. The message was clear. Humanity possessed the military strength to defend itself against any force the Council might assemble. On the Council homeworld, Admiral Thexran of the Dominion fleet studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The human ships surrounding his planet carried weapons that exceeded anything in the Council arsenal. More troubling, intelligence reports indicated that similar vessels had appeared near every major Council world simultaneously. "How many ships do they have?" he asked his intelligence chief. "Unknown, sir. Our estimates suggested they possessed perhaps 50 military vessels total. Current sensor readings indicate at least 300 major warships, with capabilities that exceed our best designs." Back in the Council chamber, Dr. So Young received a discreet communication update and smiled slightly before continuing her address. "Some of you may be considering military action to reverse humanity's independence," she said, causing surprised murmurs among representatives who thought their deliberations were secret. "I would advise against such action. Humanity has spent 30 years preparing for war with the Council. We are ready." High Chancellor Velmoth consulted urgently with his military advisors, who confirmed that human warships had appeared near every major Council world. The implications were staggering. Humanity possessed not only the military strength to defend themselves, but the capability to threaten Council worlds directly. "Dr. Park," the Chancellor said finally, "what assurance? Can you give that humanity will not use its military capabilities aggressively against Council members?" "The same assurance the Council gave to primitive species for centuries," So Young replied coldly. "None whatsoever. However, humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We seek only recognition of our sovereignty and the establishment of a more equitable galactic order." The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours. Species representatives argued, negotiated, and eventually began to accept the new reality that humanity had imposed through superior military planning and execution. The final vote was closer than anyone had expected. Humanity's demands for full Council membership and reform of the classification system passed by a margin of only 12 votes. But the vote was enough to fundamentally change the structure of galactic civilization. 6 months later, Dr. Park So-Young stood in her new office as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, reviewing reports from human colonies that were expanding freely throughout space for the first time in decades. The Council's restrictions on human territory had been lifted, and dozens of species formerly classified as primitive had gained independence with human support. Captain Kim Do-hyun commanded the first joint human-alien exploration mission, working alongside former Council enforcers who now viewed humans as respected equals rather than primitive subjects. The psychological transformation was as important as the political changes. Commander Lee Tae-ho observed Earth from his command station, knowing that humanity had not merely survived their introduction to galactic politics, but had fundamentally altered the rules of the game. The Council still existed, but its absolute authority had been broken forever. The most significant change was philosophical rather than military. Throughout the galaxy, younger species were no longer content to accept primitive classifications that restricted their development. Humanity had proven that age did not determine capability, and that careful preparation could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The human victory had triggered a galactic renaissance, as species that had been suppressed for centuries began to explore their full potential. New technologies, new art forms,